One unexpected statement from a US congresswoman left an entire nation stunned, leaving the president of Burkina Faso in tears, speechless. What did she say that changed everything? And how did this moment spark a global movement for dignity and self-reliance? Stay with me, because this story will not only change how you see leadership, it will change how you see the world. Dear friends, what you're about to hear is more than just a story. It's a glimpse into a world where quiet courage reshapes destinies and dignity outshines power. These are the voices often missed by the headlines, but not here. If this kind of storytelling moves you, if it stays with you long after the screen fades, we invite you to subscribe and ring the bell. And before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. We read every word. Now let's begin. The morning in Ouagadougou was like any other, quiet, routine, and filled with the soft hum of bureaucracy. President Ibrahim Traoré sat at his desk, immersed in the usual stacks of documents. The country was moving forward, but for the president, this was just another day. He didn't expect much from his scheduled virtual meeting with a US congresswoman. It was nothing personal, just another diplomatic conversation among many. Or so he thought. The message arrived unexpectedly, like a gust of wind breaking the stillness. Amina, his assistant, burst into his office. She was flustered, her breath heavy, a stark contrast to her usual composed demeanor. Her words tumbled out in a rush. "Mr. President, you need to see this." There was urgency in her voice, an energy that immediately caught his attention. For a moment, Traoré felt the weight of something shifting in the air. "Another sports match?" he asked, trying to lighten the mood. But the look on Amina's face told him it was more than that. It was a call for attention, a moment that would change everything. She handed him a tablet, her hands trembling. With a furrowed brow, Traoré took it, unsure of what was waiting for him. What he saw stunned him. On the screen was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, speaking with a fire that could not be ignored. His heart skipped a beat as her words rang out, her voice cutting through the screen with a force he had never expected from someone so far removed from his world. She spoke of dignity, of a vision for Africa that defied expectations, that lifted it beyond the shadows of dependency. And then she spoke of him, praising his leadership, his courage to reject foreign aid in favor of self-reliance. But it wasn't just the words that shook him, it was the truth in them. How could she, an American politician, so powerfully capture the essence of his work, the struggles and triumphs of his people? How could she, with such clarity, voice the dreams of a nation he had dedicated his life to serving? He had never expected this. He had never anticipated that her words would leave him speechless, and yet here he was, his breath caught in his throat, unable to speak, tears welling up in his eyes. This moment, this unexpected statement, had ignited something far greater than a simple diplomatic exchange. It was the spark of a global movement, one that would not be easily forgotten. And it all started with a speech that no one saw coming. As President Ibrahim Traoré sat in his office, his mind still reeling from the unexpected praise he had just witnessed, the weight of the moment settled on him. He had been used to the calculated diplomacy of world leaders, the well-rehearsed lines, the smiles that masked true intentions. But Jasmine Crockett's words were different. They were raw, unapologetic, and brutally honest, something he had not expected, let alone received. He had spent years navigating the delicate dance of international relations, trying to maintain his country's sovereignty, but always under the looming shadow of external pressure. And yet here was this American congresswoman who had not only recognized his efforts, but celebrated them in front of a global audience. Her speech, just 6 minutes long, held more weight than any international agreement or diplomatic handshake could ever convey. It wasn't just a praise of his leadership, it was a profound recognition of what he and the people of Burkina Faso had achieved. She spoke of the strength found in rejecting the shackles of foreign aid, of fostering self-reliance, and of a vision for Africa that transcended the outdated narratives of dependency. These were ideals that Traoré had championed for years, but to hear them spoken with such conviction and clarity from a foreign leader left him in stunned silence. But it wasn't just her words that struck him, it was the connection she had made to his people. Jasmine Crockett had seen beyond the headlines, beyond the poverty-stricken images of Africa often portrayed in the West. She understood the true spirit of Burkina Faso, its resilience, its ingenuity, and its refusal to accept the status quo. In that moment, Traoré realized that her message wasn't just a political statement. It was a call for change, a rallying cry for those who had long been ignored by the international community. It was a recognition of the power and dignity of his people, and it ignited something within him, a renewed sense of purpose. As the world watched, Traoré felt a shift in the air. What had begun as a diplomatic call had transformed into a moment of historical significance. Jasmine Crockett had reminded him, and the world, that leadership wasn't about following the rules. It was about forging new paths, about making the difficult choices that ultimately lift nations. And in her speech, she had offered not just validation, but solidarity, a reminder that even in a world full of obstacles, dignity and self-determination would always prevail. As President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his office, processing the weight of Jasmine Crockett's words, a sense of profound reflection washed over him. He had long known the challenges his nation faced, Burkina Faso's battle to maintain its sovereignty amidst the pressure to conform to the whims of foreign powers. His policies, often seen as unconventional or defiant, were the embodiment of his belief that true freedom could not be bought or bargained for. They were born from a desire to protect the dignity of his people, to forge a future that was not dependent on external aid, but on the strength and resilience of the people themselves. Yet, no matter how firm his convictions, the validation of his actions by a prominent voice like Crockett's sent shockwaves through his heart. In those few minutes, Jasmine Crockett had done more than just praise his leadership. She had given a voice to a movement he had been nurturing in silence for years. She had not only acknowledged his vision but had amplified it on a global stage, challenging the tired narratives about Africa's place in the world. The words she spoke resonated with a deep, stirring truth that transcended politics. She had reminded him of the importance of staying true to one's values, even in the face of overwhelming pressure. What struck him most was the way she spoke not just about Burkina Faso, but about the dignity of his people. He had often struggled to convey this truth to the international community, that Africa, and especially his country, was not a place in need of saving, but a place of untapped potential. Crockett's speech gave voice to that sentiment in a way he had never imagined. It was as though her words were a mirror, reflecting back to him the very ideals he had fought for, but had often been told were too idealistic. Sitting there in his office, with the weight of the world bearing down on him, Ibrahim Traoré found himself at a crossroads. Jasmine Crockett's unexpected statement had not only lifted his spirits, but it had reignited a fire within him. It reminded him that the fight for dignity and self-determination was not a fight he had to face alone. There were allies in the most unexpected places, people who saw the same potential, the same strength, and the same promise that he did. And as the world watched, Traoré realized that his leadership, his vision, and his people were finally being recognized for what they truly were. Not subjects of pity or charity, but powerful agents of change. As the weeks passed, the ripple effects of Jasmine Crockett's speech continued to reverberate across the globe, but for President Ibrahim Traoré, the most profound transformation took place within himself. His initial shock had given way to a quiet but steadfast resolve. Crockett's words had awakened something deep inside him, a reminder of the significance of his mission and the weight of the responsibility he carried not just for Burkina Faso, but for an entire continent. Her recognition had, in a sense, validated every decision he had made in the face of international pressure. It wasn't just political affirmation, it was a deeply personal one. Every day, Traoré walked the fine line between progress and tradition, pushing for reforms that would empower his people while resisting the temptation to succumb to the aid-driven model that many Western countries continued to offer. He had always believed that real independence came from within, and his leadership had been about creating a self-sustaining nation where dignity came first. But seeing Crockett speak of him with such admiration, with such clarity, made him feel seen in a way he had never expected. Her words weren't just a validation, they were a spark that set off a much larger conversation, one that reached far beyond the walls of his presidential office. In his quiet moments, Traoré would think about the global reaction to Crockett's speech. The memes and the playful jokes, although humorous, were a far cry from the deeper message that had caught fire in the hearts of millions. The hashtags, the online conversations, the rising calls for true empowerment, they spoke to something far bigger than one speech, one leader, or one country. It was about a shift in the way the world viewed Africa, not as a place of suffering or need, but as a continent full of untapped potential and, more importantly, untold stories of resilience and hope. Yet despite this growing global support, Traoré knew that the path forward would not be easy. The forces of global diplomacy, trade and aid still loomed large, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone. He felt like a part of something much larger than himself. In that moment, as he reflected on the magnitude of Crockett's words, he understood that this was only the beginning. The real challenge now was to take this momentum, this newfound global attention, and turn it into something tangible. He wasn't just leading a country, he was leading a movement, one that would take time, patience, and collective strength to shape. But for the first time, he felt that his vision could truly be realized, and, most importantly, the world was listening. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when President Ibrahim Traoré stood at the podium in front of a crowd that had come to see what the movement he had sparked could truly achieve. The excitement in the air was palpable, but so was the weight of the moment. He knew that the journey ahead would be long, that the hurdles of international diplomacy and the lingering shadows of global expectations still loomed large. But something within him had shifted. The words of Jasmine Crockett, their unexpected power, their depth, had reminded him why he had chosen this path in the first place. His vision for a self-reliant, dignified Burkina Faso was no longer a solitary pursuit. It was a global call, one that echoed from Washington to Ouagadougou, from the rural villages of Burkina Faso to the urban centers of the world. The Sovereign Future Initiative had always been a dream, but now it had the momentum to become something real. Traoré, more than ever, believed in his people. His resolve to keep pushing forward, even in the face of adversity, had deepened. As he stood before his people, he knew they had already begun to see the changes that he had promised. The soil that once held only the promise of survival now held the seeds of a prosperous future. In the midst of all this, there was something that Traoré could not escape, the powerful bond he had formed with the people of his country. It was not just about the grand speeches or the global recognition, it was about the quiet moments, the personal stories, the everyday acts of resilience and hope that fueled his drive. He thought about Mariama, the widow turned carpenter who had found new hope in the Sovereign Future Initiative. He remembered the joy in the eyes of farmers who had reclaimed their land, of children who now had access to education. Each of these stories was a testament to the truth that dignity was not just an abstract idea, it was a living, breathing force that could be seen in the faces of the people who believed in it, even when the world had given up on them. The world was beginning to take notice. What had started as a small spark, ignited by a single powerful speech, had now evolved into a global movement. But Traoré knew better than to let the praise cloud his vision. His work was far from over. The road ahead was filled with uncertainty, but one thing was certain. He was no longer alone. His vision for a self-sustaining, dignified Africa had gained the attention and support it needed. And with that, Traoré felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world was ready to listen. Now it was time to act. In this powerful story, President Ibrahim Traoré's leadership was transformed by an unexpected moment. The words of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett ignited a flame within him and across the globe, causing him to see not just his nation, but Africa as a whole in a new light. Her impassioned speech, which praised his refusal to follow the status quo and his commitment to self-reliance, set in motion a ripple effect of empowerment. What began as a routine diplomatic exchange turned into a historic moment that reminded people everywhere that dignity, not aid, was the key to true progress. The emotional journey of Traoré, from a president overwhelmed by global admiration to a man deeply connected to the hopes and struggles of his people, teaches us that leadership is not defined by titles or positions. True leadership is found in recognizing and nurturing the potential of those around us, in giving others the platform to rise, and in believing in their strength and dignity, even when the world doubts them. From this story, we can learn that our greatest potential lies within us, not in external aid or validation. When we are empowered to take control of our own destinies, we can achieve far more than we ever thought possible. It is a call to leaders everywhere to look inward, to trust in the strength of their people, and to create environments where dignity, respect, and self-reliance are the cornerstones of progress. Quiz. Question. What was the key factor that led to President Ibrahim Traoré's transformation in the story? A. International recognition. B. The support and empowerment of his people. Please comment your answer below, A or B. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share your perspective. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support more inspiring stories and fresh content.